Welcome back to Inside Politics. Our guests today are Democrat Larry Woods and Republican Bill Phillips. We're talking about the state of recent politics, particularly the two political parties. Larry, there's continuing talk that Mr. Trump is seeking not only to discourage if Republicans control the House in 2023, there's some talk about getting Mr. Trump to be a candidate to be Speaker of the House if the Republicans take over the House in 2023. House rules allow a non-member of Congress to be a Speaker, although that's never happened. How politically viable idea is that, Larry? And should the Democrats push the idea of Trump as Speaker in order to get more Democrats to turn out to vote?
No, please, no. Sure, it might get us a few more votes. It's not worth it. I mean, that kind of change of tradition of our history and governance would be astounding. I think Mr. Trump would love it. You're going to pay me a lot of money, give me a huge prestige and boost my ego, and I don't really have to do anything? Yeah, I'll take that job. I don't think the Republicans would. They might talk about it for publicity purposes. I don't think there's any way the Republican Party would do that if they take control of the House.
Bill, will the Republicans take that seriously? I mean, if they take over the House, how serious an effort will that be? And wouldn't that further split the Republican Party even more wide open to have to make a choice between him and somebody else to be the Speaker?
I can't imagine either party being in the majority and thinking that they want to bring an outsider in. Every morning the members of the House of Representatives see a speaker when they look in the mirror.
How true.
Well, Bill, in terms of the current Congress, Larry mentioned the infrastructure bills, which are both sort of stuck on the Hill right now and have been for some time. One's a bipartisan effort for bricks and mortar projects. The other regards a lot of social service infrastructure improvements and new programs. That's what seems to have Democrats divided, and that's what seems to be stalling the bill. Bill, one of your jobs as a top aide to Nashville Mayor John Cooper, I suspect the city's ready to spend those federal dollars if they come down, but are you getting concerned those monies might never get to you to be able to do anything with them?
Well, we're watching it very closely and frankly optimistic that the Congress and then the president will come to an agreement because the nation needs an infusion of money to increase social services, but also our infrastructure at every level and every mode of transportation that you take. And then there are health issues connected with infrastructure that are in dire need of attention and correction. Nashville, we have a plan, particularly in the area of transportation, that we are ready to move forward. We're already working closely with the state on some improvements that need to be made, and this bill is critical.
Larry, why can't your party's progressives and moderates get together and agree on something? Is the problem that the Democrats really don't have much of a majority, don't have a majority of a size that it requires to pass such massive and sweeping bills? I mean, we're talking trillions of dollars in both cases. To use a sports term from boxing, haven't the Democrats been trying to punch way above their weight?
They're missing a lot of punches, too. It's so close, such a close majority, that the differences between the moderates and the progressives in my party are exaggerated. It's a big tent. And that's what Biden really addressed this morning or when Biden spoke, that's what he addressed. He was really talking to his own Democratic Party. And I think that the Democratic Party will come together. I think Mencken and Sinema will wind up voting the correct way. It's just a question of how much Biden and the progressives are going to have to give up to get that vote. I think ultimately over the next week or two, they'll do so.
Well, the bill may already been cut by more than half on the social services side, down to $1.5 trillion from $3.5 trillion, or 1.75 trillion. Is this controversial? You don't think it's going to leave any permanent marks within the Democratic Party? You don't think either Manchin or Sinema are going to see primary opponents the next time they run for office?
I think Sinema may. I think Manchin's the only Democrat that can win statewide office in West Virginia, so that sort of insulates him. Sinema, on the other hand, all the Democrats know a Democrat can win. In Arizona, it doesn't have to be Ms. Sinema. Mr. Kelly, who's the other senator from Arizona, is a first-term Democrat. I think Sinema will have significant opposition in the Democratic primary unless she heals the wounds she's been causing.
Bill, if these two bills pass, particularly as the social services bill being cut as much as it has been, will the laws make enough difference to really help Democrats much in 2022?
Well, first of all, even with the cut, it's a lot of money. Sure, more could be spent, but if it's invested well, but I do think that if this happens, it will help both the Biden administration, but those that are running for re-election, and in some cases, Republicans would be helped too if they support it.
Larry, given the problems we've seen with recent rollouts of major federal programs, I'm thinking about the extra unemployment during the pandemic, the stimulus checks, and Obamacare a few years ago, should Democrats be concerned that their big new government programs won't make much impact in time so they can brag about it at the polls as Democratic candidates?
They won't make much impact unless President Biden and his team do an effective communications job, which so far they haven't. I'd rate them about a C+ so far. I like them, but C+. Rollouts in a nation of 300 million people are always going to be difficult. But again, Biden's on the right plane attack here. He goes back to the history of look what we do with interstate highways, look what we do with the space program, look what we did with the internet. Our government has the greatest accomplishments in the history of the world. So we need to come together, we're talking about the nation, not just the Democrats, and do the same thing for the climate problems. Nashville and Middle Tennessee, the 10 worst weather events of last year, 5 of them hit Nashville. I mean, this is a real problem for all of us. We've got to worry about our grandkids here as well as ourselves.
In the first segment of the program, we talked about divisions within both political parties. Are they significant enough to make any permanent disruption or schisms in either party? Bill, you respond about that first, and Larry.
Well, I think in the case of the Republican Party, it has already occurred. The question is who's going to be able to claim the name Republican. What is going on now, in my opinion, is that there is no Republican Party. There is a group using that title, but they really are people who following Mr. Trump. And that's populist. They're Democrats, they're Republicans, and they're independents. And so the struggle will be over the next several years. Will the traditional Republican leadership go back into the control and maintain that control, or will there be another organization begin to emerge? And that's not an impossible thing to happen. It's happened before.
Larry, from what you've said, you appear that the Democrats are going to stay united, whatever in the Democratic Party that means.
This is a real sea change. For 75 years, my Democrats have been far more divided than the Republicans. But now, the last 3-4 years, it's changed. Now the Republicans are more divided than the Democrats. I think everybody in my party, from Elizabeth Warren and AOC and Nancy Pelosi, right over to the conservative Democrats, all of us understand we're all Democrats. Nobody's getting read out of the party. I don't foresee that happening under any circumstances.
Larry Woods is our guest, along with Bill Phillips. Larry Woods, Democrat, Bill Phillips, Republican, talking about the state of the Republican Party and the Democratic Party these days. Back to continue our conversation after this break.